Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. Today we'll be completely uncovering the minor blues scale. So at the end of this lesson, you'll be familiar with the formula of the minor blues scale and the theory behind the notes, as well as how to apply it to the fretboard and construct the 5 interlocking box patterns that we have that span the fretboard. Okay, so if that sounds good to you, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and please share because that really helps grow the channel as well. And let's get right into it. So as a teacher, it seems to be a common thing that a student shows up and they already know their minor pentatonic scale. And a lot of students have really done their homework and memorized all 5 box patterns of the minor pentatonic. But a strange thing happens when I ask them to play the blues scale. Even though we're only introducing one note into the scale, they get lost and they can't remember which note that is. So a root cause of this is not understanding the minor pentatonic scale well enough to really move on. It's not enough to just know the box patterns. You also want to understand the intervals within that scale. So this lesson is going to be based in A minor. A minor, the 5 box patterns fall nicely on the guitar where everybody's going to have access to play all 5 patterns. And theory-wise, there's no sharps or flats, which is nice for a lot of people as well. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 scales today. We're going to start very briefly with the A minor or Aeolian scale mode. From that, we're going to extract the minor pentatonic. And then from there, we can add one additional note, the flat 5, and arrive at the blues scale. Okay, so let's take a look at the A minor scale, and that's just the notes A to A, no sharps or flats, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay, A is our first note of the scale, or scale degree 1. B is scale degree 2. C is scale degree 3, and notice that that's labeled as a flat 3. I'll come back to that in a second. D is scale degree 4. E is 5. F is scale degree 6, which again is labeled as flat 6. G is labeled as a flat 7, that's our 7th degree, and then we're back at the root, our octave, perfect 8th, or you can think of it as 1 again. Okay, so we have those 7 notes in the scale. Now let's just briefly look at the 3rd, the 6th, and the 7th degrees. Those are labeled as flat 3, flat 6, and flat 7. So why is that? That is synonymous with minor 3rd, minor 6th, minor 7th. Okay, so we're indicating that above the root, the C is a minor 3rd, the F is a minor 6th, and the G is a minor 7th, okay? And that's to distinguish it from any other scale where those intervals would be a major 3rd, such as the major scale. In the major scale, it's a major 3rd, 6th, and 7th above the root, okay? So the formula 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7 is unique to the natural minor or Aeolian mode scale, okay? So that's why we use the flats to indicate those certain degrees. Now, let's apply that scale to the fretboard so that we can start visualizing this and really using it. So we're going to start with A on the 5th fret of the E string, B on the 7th fret, C on the 8th fret, D on the 5th fret of A, E on the 7th fret, F on the 8th fret, G on the 5th fret of D, and then A again on the 7th fret. So there's our 1 octave A natural minor scale. Now, since this is a video dealing with the minor blues scale, that's as far as we have to go with the natural minor. But we're going to extract the pentatonic scale out of this first by removing 2 notes. If we were to take the 2nd note, the B, remove that note, then the 6th note of the scale, the F, remove that note, we're left with 5 notes, hence the term penta in the name pentatonic, and we have a pattern that looks like this. Probably getting to be a pattern that a lot of you recognize, right? Now let's just go over the intervals in that pattern where we have a root, and then we have a flat 3, no more 2nd degree, a 4th, a 5th, no more 6th degree, but we have that flat 7 still, and then back on the root. Now, this is where you can run into trouble if this is as far as you take your study. If you just start blasting up and down the pattern and think you've got it, then pretty soon your knowledge of what we've just covered is going to diminish. You really have to study from here and ingrain this stuff in your brain. So what we're going to do is study from the root the intervals that make up this scale. So there's going to be a little bit of memorizing here for you, and you're going to want to run with this and memorize all the intervals too. But just to really understand the minor pentatonic, let's start on the root and then play the flat 3. Okay, so we're going from our first note of the scale to the second note of the scale. But look at that shape. We've played a note, the root. We went up 3 frets and played another note, the flat 3. But that forms a minor third shape on the guitar. Okay, so you want to memorize that shape that's the shape of a minor third. So no matter where you play a note on the guitar, you can just pick a random note. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about the notes that I'm hitting. I'm just hitting a note, moving up 3 frets, hitting another one. And I know just because of patterns on the fretboard that that's a minor third. Right? Doesn't matter, as long as you're playing that pattern, it's a minor third. Okay, so now from our root to the next note in our scale, that is a perfect fourth. So there's the next interval pattern to remember. That perfect fourth interval. It's pretty easy to remember. It's just adjacent strings on the same fret, a little mini bar, right? And now move up to the next note in the scale from the root to the next note. So from the root to the fifth. Well, that's a nice easy shape to remember. That's the power chord shape, right? So when you're playing a power chord, you're really just taking a root and the fifth note of the scale. Okay. Now, from the root to the next note of the scale is a minor seventh interval. So there's another shape for you to remember. And now, last one here, root to root, is an octave shape. So we have all of these intervals from the root that you want to remember: the minor third, the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, the minor seventh, and the perfect eighth or octave. Okay, now, before we extend this into more octaves and start covering the fretboard with it, let's just add in that missing note to turn it into the blues scale. So the note that we want to add in is the flat 5. So we're going to have a 6-note scale, and we know where our fifth is, that E on the 7th fret of A. So just go down a half step to the flat 5 and add that into the scale, and now we have our blues scale. Okay, probably a pattern that a lot of you recognize, but now you understand what's going on and why that note is the one that we're adding in. But that gives us a new interval pattern to remember as well. It's a diminished fifth. Okay, so from our root up to that 6th fret of A, the flat 5 or diminished fifth, very harsh sounding interval, but that's the one that we add. So we have that new interval shape. Okay, so there's all the intervals that we really need to come to terms with to understand the minor pentatonic and by extension, the blues scale. So spend some time just playing with one octave, because as we add more notes and more patterns, all that we're doing is duplicating those 6 notes. No matter where we are on the fretboard, we're always just going to have those 6 notes, okay? So spend some time playing up and down that scale pattern, getting comfortable with it, and really visualizing those intervals, okay? Because as we go up, let's get into the second octave. So we're going to start with A on the 7th fret of D to start building our second octave. From there, let's add our minor third. Oh, well, that's different, right? We have a new minor third shape to memorize. Okay, that is also a minor third shape from the 7th fret of the D string to the 5th fret of G. That forms the same interval as that playing a note going up 3 frets and playing another one, right? So now you have 2 minor third shapes that you want to remember, okay? Now, our next note of the scale is still a perfect fourth above the root. Same shape as we had in our lower octave, just adjacent strings, same fret. Diminished fifth, right? Same shape that we just had down on the bottom octave as well. Perfect fifth. There's a new pattern for you to remember as well. Our old one was the power chord shape. Now we have a new one. Right? Same pitches, just different way of playing it, but you need to know this stuff. So there's a new fifth, a new way of playing a fifth for you. Now a minor seventh above that root, right? And now the minor seventh looks a bit different because we're on the B string. Due to the tuning difference between the G and the B, it's only a third. All the other strings are tuned to fourths. Anything that falls on that B string, we need to move up a half of a step. So in our lower octave, we had root to flat 7, right? It's in the same frets. Well, here we have to move that minor 7 up half a step because it's on the B string, okay? So there's a new pattern too. So you have to understand, kind of come to terms with that tuning difference on the guitar, which is a little bit beyond the scope of this lesson. But, I'm sure you can take this concept and run with it. Okay, so we've got root, flat 3, root, perfect 4th, root, flat 5, root, perfect 5th, root, flat 7, and now root to root. And there's a new octave pattern for you as well. From the 7th fret of D to the 5th fret of the high string is a new octave shape. So now we have our second octave of the blues scale. Okay? A few different, all the same intervals, but just different ways they form different patterns. So different patterns on the fretboard, different ways of playing those same intervals. You have to memorize these different interval shapes. Okay, so now we have one more root up there on the high string. By playing that first method of getting our minor third, we can add another flat 3 into that pattern. So we're extending into the third octave by a minor third. And now we have 2 octaves plus a little bit, and it's all in one position. We end up with this scale pattern. Okay, now, before we start moving into the other scale patterns, let's just talk about ways of memorizing this. The roots are key, right? You want to know those roots, like where they are. You don't want to be thinking about that at all. By the time you've really studied this stuff, you don't want to be thinking about any of this stuff at all. But that's your starting point, is those roots. And then from there, you can start thinking. It shouldn't be hard to construct the scale because you see all those interval shapes. Okay, a minor third, perfect 4th, flat 5, perfect 5th, flat 7, and there's my octave, right? You can see all those shapes, and you can construct that scale really quickly. Same with the second octave, right? Just spend some time studying those interval patterns. And then also, though, ask yourself, where are all my roots in there? Where are my thirds in this pattern? Be able to pick all these notes out. Where are my fourths? Where are my fifths? Where are my flat 5s? And where are my 7ths? Right? Know where all those different intervals are within that scale pattern. Really quiz yourself on that and spend a lot of time just on one pattern. If you spend a lot of time on one pattern rather than skipping around to all the different patterns, you'll really learn that pattern, but it will translate and you'll pick up on the other patterns much faster. Okay. So it's not a waste of time, even though maybe the minor pentatonic scale seems, fairly basic. It's not a waste of time. You'll pick up on everything faster. Okay. So that's minor blues scale pattern 1. Now, all that we have to do is apply the same knowledge into the other patterns. So let's move into pattern 2. And you're going to have to memorize, the fretboard memorization is something that you want to do in addition to all of what we're talking about. That's another skill that you should be working on. But you need to know where the roots are in these patterns. So box pattern number 2 is constructed around these 2 roots. That's where our roots are in box pattern 2. And from there, you just construct the same intervals. Root to minor third. These are all intervals that we've already covered. Nothing new. It's all the same shapes, right? Root to perfect 4th. Root to diminished 5th. Root to perfect 5th. Root to flat 7. Root to root. Right? That root pattern, again, falls on the B string. That octave falls on the B string, so we've moved it up back from where our old shape was. It's up 1/2 step. Okay, and then from that root, up on the higher octave, minor third, same as that second minor third that we had in box pattern 1, right? The same shape. Then to our perfect 4th, diminished 5th. And that's really all that we have access to in this box pattern. But if you're really thinking about things, you know, right, you could slide up into that perfect fifth. There's access there. So we have the top 4 strings. And a lot of students, you know, once they've understood the concept in the first box pattern, they find constructing that scale on the top 4 strings of box pattern 2 quite easy. But there's a little bit more involved with this scale pattern because we have 2 additional strings, but they're below the root. So really what we're going to be doing is inverting the intervals that we already know. But let's just take a look at this slowly. So we're going to go root down to flat 7. Right? So the flat 7 is a whole step below the root. So we're following a major second. So instead of going up a minor 7th to get the 7th, we're going to fall a major second to get that flat 7 below the root. So like I said, we're inverting the interval. Now when you invert, it's going to add up to 9. So going up a 7th or down a second, that adds up to 9, 7 plus 2. And the quality of the interval also switches from minor to major. So we went up a minor 7th, we're going to go down a major second, okay? But the big thing to remember there, I find, is just that the 7th is a whole step below the root, right? If you can remember that, it's going to be quite easy to construct that from the root. Now, the perfect fifth is going to invert to a perfect fourth. So it's right below the root as a perfect fourth. So instead of going up a perfect fifth, we're going to go down a perfect fourth. So 5 plus 4 equals 9, but the perfect title stays the same. That doesn't change. Okay, so I'm not going to get into a whole inversion lesson here, but if we know that's our perfect fifth, then half a step lower is the flat 5. Plus, we're just going to mirror this high string down on the low one. So flat 5, half a step down to our fourth, a whole step down to our flat 3, and then you can fall out of position just to end it on the root if you want. But there's our full box pattern number 2 minor blues scale. Okay, notice how I start and stop on the root. That is a good knowledge to have so that you know exactly where those roots are, but also it's training your ear to get the sound of that scale in your ear. If you're just starting and stopping on any random note, you're not training your ears effectively to hear that scale, okay? So train yourself to start and stop on the root of these scale patterns. Now, you know, again, study the intervals in that scale. Ask yourself, where are the roots? Where are the thirds, the fifths, all of that. See if you can pick them out and really learn the intervals within that one shape. Because if you can't see those intervals and you don't know them like immediately, it's very hard to use. Okay, so once you can see those intervals, you're free to start improvising and creating stuff. Right? I couldn't play something like that if I didn't know what the intervals were that I was playing, but I know which ones to highlight and I know which ones are going to sound good. So it's very beneficial to do this work. Okay, now we've pretty much covered all the concepts we need to, but let's just march through the other 3 scale patterns quickly so that you have all 5 of them. So our third box is constructed around a new root pattern, 12th fret of A, and we have another A up on the 10th fret of B. Okay. So starting on this lower A on the 5th string, we'll move up to the D string to get our flat 3, 4th, and flat 5. Moving up to the G string to get 5 and flat 7. And then we've got our octave on the B string. So there's 1 octave. And moving up from that second root, the flat 3rd is on the same string. And moving up to the high E string to get the 4th, flat 5, 5. Okay, and we can, again, think down from the root, think below the root, move down a whole step to get the flat 7 on the A string, and then go down to the low E string to pick up the 5th on the 12th fret there, and then move a half step down for the flat 5, another half step down for the 4th. Okay, so there's our full box pattern 3. Let's just play up and down that. Okay, now moving into box pattern 4. We again have 2 roots, an A on the 12th fret of A again, and an A on the 14th fret of the G string. Okay, so once again, starting on that 5th string root, we pick up the flat 3 on the same string, moving up to the D string to get 4, flat 5, 5, moving up to the G string to get the flat 7, and the root. So there's 1 octave. Okay, starting on that 2nd A on the G string, move up to the B string to get flat 3, 4, and flat 5. And notice there's that B string changing our interval shape again. So just be aware of that. And then move up to the high E string to get the perfect 5th and the flat 7. Okay, so there's 5 strings. Think down below the root again a whole step to get our flat 7 on the 15th fret of the low E and our 5th on the 12th fret, and that's really all we have available in that position. So there's our full minor blues pattern in box pattern 4. Okay, now moving into our last box pattern, we've got 3 roots in this one, on the 17th fret of the low E, 14th fret of G, and 17th fret of the high E. Okay, so let's start on that low root, 17th fret of the low E, moving up to the A string to pick up flat 3, 4, and flat 5, moving up to the D string to get perfect 5th and flat 7, and then our octave on the 14th fret of G. Moving up from there, we've got our flat 3 on that same string. Moving up to the B string to get 4, flat 5, and 5. And moving up to the high E string to get flat 7 and root. And we have one more flat 7 on that low E string that we have available to us in that pattern as well. So there is the full box pattern 5 with a little lick. Okay, so I hope that this lesson has helped clear up a lot of questions that you may have had about constructing and playing the minor blues scales, specifically adding that flat 5 into the minor pentatonic. So it might take a little bit of study, but it's well worth it, and you'll be blasting all over the fretboard in no time with these scales, I'm sure. So until next time, please like, subscribe, and share, and check my Patreon out for a little more in-depth detail into some of these lessons that I have on YouTube, and I'll see you next time.